in the process, that was Drew's first video production. We hope there will be many more. But I think he did a great job, and you can see how something like this would be useful to the community. They recently had a Princeville Day, and as people were waiting in long lines for their food, they played the flood stories. Princeville, by the way, is a very religious town, and there are frequent references to God, and the music, which is from Princeville itself, is part of what their approach or Weltanschauung is, if you will. That's not a term that's used in the community. Okay, in the remaining 5 minutes, I want to just raise a couple of issues because it looks good. We think there are a lot of positive benefits, but if you look at number 5 on the handout, there are also some critical considerations of dialect awareness and preservation programs and community. You know, the fact of the matter is notions such as partnership, gratuity, collaboration, and benefit are ideologically laden notions. You know, working out the everyday details of gratuity and negotiating community-based partnerships can often be complicated and controversial, you know. And so what are some of the issues that arise? First of all, there are issues of power and authority, you know. The fact of the matter is, with respect to things related to language, you know, we have a position of power in terms of that relationship. On other levels, we are, however, subservient, and they have the information. So, for example, in terms of the flood stories, we knew nothing. All we had was some video expertise, at least we pawned it off as expertise, that we could help. Also, to go back to how we might fit our research needs with theirs, many of these flood stories then became the topic for Dave Herman's discourse course, since we, in the process of getting the flood stories on behalf of the community, we now have a nice archive of people telling flood stories. All right, and so in terms of narrative and discourse, we have another set of data. Okay, then there are the ethics of persuasion and need. We're often viewed as an oddity, and that whereas, you know, people can understand why I might be viewed as an oddity. The fact of the matter is that any linguist, given the interest, I mean, it's no different from my father, who had an 8th grade education, and we used to have these conversations about what I did for a living, and he couldn't understand the fact that I would do this, and who cared, because I didn't make anything for anybody. And then his final line was always, well, why would anybody pay you to do that? All right, another concern is the commodification of vernacular speech. Often in our presentations, and this is something that we're trying to address, although maybe not that adequately, there are questions of the fact that we tend to idealize Basilecto versions of language because of sort of the exotic vernacular fixation that has in some sense perhaps dominated my world. And that is a problem because communities represent a whole range of sociolinguistic variation. And one of the discussions that we had the other day as Drew and Tyler were preparing their talk on Princeville, the first talk on the data, is we only have a few teenagers at this point, and they tend to sound much more vernacular than, much less vernacular than we think they should, given sort of our impressions of the community and so forth. And so what do we do with these data that seem to be out of sort, you know, and one of the things that I said to them, look, this is the community, you know? There are standard speakers in these communities, you know, and if this is what they are, you know, what we need to do is explain, you know, these speakers, rather than sort of search for the most vernacular speaker in the sort of Wolframian tradition. All right. Then there's the issue of socio-educational change. The fact of the matter is, linguists have an agenda and an ideology. And they have an agenda of change. We do want to change attitudes about language. We do want to change perceptions of language. And it's kind of a sociolinguist noblesse agenda. But maybe it's antithetical to what the community desires in terms of where it wants to go, how it wants to define itself, both in relationship to its education, which is an important aspect of the principal community, and also to the outside world. So these are issues, where linguists may come in and view this as, gee, this is the great historical legacy, whereas folks may say, well, vernacular dialects are a weapon of oppression against us, and until our people can learn standard English, all right, they're going to be viewed as inadequate and illiterate. And we have a Lumley video that we've done that's aired on TV and is shown a lot in the Lumley community and around the state and so forth. And I got wonderful emails from people that said, thank you so much for recognizing the legitimacy of the Lumley dialect. But there's 1 out of 10 emails that accuses me of perpetuating racism, oppression, and illiteracy because I portray a dialect that is illegitimate. What do you do with that? All right? And finally is the profit motive. All right? Have these communities profited from our presence in their communities? There is an attitudinal change in Oakbrook over the 10 years because we teach 8th graders every year and we've done it for the last 10 or 11 years, and kids do think differently. Adults do think differently, but have they really profited from this? And how does the community feel about these things? A couple of weeks ago we showed a mountain talk at the Appalachian Studies Association, and because it was in the region where some of the community members were located, the county of Cherokee in the western part of the state, in the Appalachian mountain range, some of the community members came. And there was some discussion about the linguistic representation as the people talked about their dialect. In other words, there were a few sort of interpretations, local interpretations, that don't quite match linguists' interpretation of the development. And so at one point, one of the linguists who was asking the question said, well, what does the community think of it? And so I said, well, interesting that you asked, because we have community members here. And maybe they could answer. Guess what? They gave it the most raving, glowing response. You know what? They didn't care that we had a few things that weren't quite accurate historically in the video. What do we do with those kinds of conflicts? All right, so I need to stop, and I will stop with 1 more minute. The persistent struggles of sociolinguist community relations are the dominant local language ideology versus sociolinguistic premises. If we knew how to figure out this partnership thing and address in significant but respectful ways the principle of linguistic subordination that often exists in non-mainstream communities, it would be a lot easier.